During a campaign event in 2008, the then leader of the African National Congress, Jacob Zuma, claimed that his party would rule in South Africa until Jesus comes back. Zuma's remarks have been fairly accurate, however. Despite years of economic mishandling, record high unemployment, rampant crime, and a ridiculous amount of corruption, the ANC had managed to secure an overwhelming majority in every national election in South Africa's post-apartheid history. That is, until this year's election, which took place just last Wednesday. And the irony is that it's Zuma's return to politics in the form of his new MK party that could well be the first nail in the coffin for the ANC. Polling results now show that Zuma's MK has brought the ANC well below 50%, meaning it will have to become a coalition government for the first time ever in South Africa's history. So in this video we'll take a look at this year's election results, how Zuma's MK party managed to undermine the ANC, and most importantly, what it means for South Africa going forward. Now, to understand what's happened, you'll need to understand a little context about the political landscape in South Africa and the ANC's dominance in the country's politics. You see, the ANC started off as one of the leading anti-apartheid movements in South Africa, fighting for the rights of black South Africans in response to the racist and discriminatory policies at the time. Fast forward several decades to 1994, the ANC had become the dominant political party to contest South Africa's first post-apartheid election, under the leadership of Nelson Mandela, who had just been released from prison 4 years earlier. The election saw the ANC victorious with a clear majority of 62.7%, and they'd managed to hold the majority in every election since, until now. You see, the ANC were historically a force for good. South Africa's GDP per capita more or less doubled between 1994 and 2008, which, when coupled with more investment from abroad, led to massive improvements in living standards. Racial inequality was reduced, social services, infrastructure and education were improved, and the ANC were duly rewarded with an even higher share of the votes in the following two elections, pulling in 66.4% of the vote in 1999 and a whopping 70% in 2004. And given that seats in South Africa's National Assembly are allocated proportionally, this translated to roughly 70% of the seats being allocated to ANC members, turning South Africa into a sort of one-party state. Unfortunately for many South Africans, things started to go wrong around 2008, the same year that Jacob Zuma became president. For the next decade, South Africa's GDP per capita plateaued, wealth inequality rose to record highs, national debt ballooned, and unemployment rates went back up, rising from 22.5% in 2008 to just shy of 29% in 2019. And to add fuel to the flames, chaos within the ruling ANC itself weakened their ability to govern the country properly. Zuma's rule was also plagued with countless corruption charges, including money laundering and taking hundreds of bribes to push through a multi-billion-dollar arms deal with French company Thales. Unsurprisingly, Zuma became somewhat unpopular among the ANC electorates, and the ANC's vote share steadily declined in the following elections until Zuma himself was forced to resign in 2017, and jailed 4 years later. He was then replaced by the business mogul Cyril Ramaphosa, a man whose presidency initially instilled a lot of hope but has since been disappointing. You see, corruption has arguably gotten worse under Ramaphosa, particularly with regards to South Africa's national electricity company, Eskom, which, thanks to frequent cases of organised crime and out-of-control corruption, can't seem to supply homes across the country with anywhere near the electricity needed, leading to widespread blackouts, something known in South Africa as load shedding. In other news, South Africa's salaries and economy have remained stagnant, and the country still suffers from extremely high rates of poverty and youth unemployment, which, all in all, have led to a steady decline in the ruling ANC's electorate in the years since Ramaphosa took office. Now, if we look at this year's election results, the ANC have officially lost their majority for the first time ever in South Africa's post-apartheid history. At first glance, you'd probably think this would benefit the Democratic Alliance, South Africa's centre-right opposition party that is generally more popular with white South Africans, and openly pursues very market-oriented and capitalist policies. But this isn't true. You see, many of the ANC's past supporters have since left in favour of two more radical left-wing parties, the black nationalist and Marxist EFF, and ex-President Jacob Zuma's new MK party. But you might be thinking, hold on a minute, shouldn't Zuma be in jail? Well, if we go back for a second to 2021, Zuma was sentenced to 15 months in prison for refusing to appear in court, but after just 2 months he was suspiciously released on medical parole. The release was later ruled illegal, but Zuma never returned to prison due to supposed overcrowding and a need to protect inmates from health risks. Nevertheless, Zuma effectively got given a sort of impunity, and he's since managed to set up his own party to challenge the ANC, a party which ironically is named Umkhonto we Sizwe, or MK, after the ANC's paramilitary wing. Anyway, the election didn't go well at all for the ANC, who have pulled in a shockingly low 40% of the total electorate. The opposition DA party brought in around 22%, Zuma's MK party pulled in an astonishing 15%, whilst the radical EFF pulled in around 10%. All of this effectively means is that the ANC will have to form some kind of coalition government and partner up with one of the other main parties. But it's hard to see any of this happening in practice. You see, none of the other parties really want to coalesce with the ANC. Smaller coalitions between the ANC and EFF, for example, in areas such as Johannesburg, Ekurhuleni and Tshwane, have been more or less chaotic and disastrous, and EFF leader Julius Malema will likely push for more radical policies to be put in place, such as forcibly confiscating land from white owners, and sending arms to Russia. A coalition with a Democratic Alliance would make a bit more sense. The problem is that many within the ANC perceive the DA as a white party, and would likely resist a coalition with them, and it would only intensify the anti-ANC opinion that fueled the rise of the EFF and MK in the first place. This leaves us with Zuma's MK party, and in some respects this could be the easiest option for the ANC, especially if they wish to recall the current president, Cyril Ramaphosa. A deal here would, in effect, grant Zuma amnesty in South African politics, given a substantial backlog of corruption charges and scandals. Nevertheless, cutting a deal with Zuma and allowing him back into South African politics wouldn't do much to improve the ANC's public image with regards to corruption, and there's no guarantee that Zuma would actually cooperate with the ANC for the full 5 years of their term. But whatever happens and whoever the ANC decides to cut a deal with, what's pretty much certain is that none of this will bode well for South Africa in the short term. Perhaps the only real positive takeaway from everything that's happening here is that South Africa could well be moving away from the ANC, who've almost managed to secure South Africa a spot on the list of failed states. It could well be the start of a long road to a more transparent, wealthier and more prosperous South Africa. I hope you managed to learn a thing or two from this video. A lot of effort goes into making them, and if you haven't yet subscribed, now would be a good time to do so. Don't forget to also hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any future content. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.